So today we're talking about watering. And like I said, it's very timely. The hot weather is upon us. We know we need to hydrate. Our dogs, cats, the birds, bird baths, pollinators, they all need water. And I think the vast majority of people know that plants need water, but the why and the how kind of throw a lot of people off. They, the plant needs water, but why? And I think, you know what occurred to me when I was building this PowerPoint is I can tell you why plants need water. I can explain how the water works. I can explain about the phloem and the xylem and photosynthesis, dissolution, I can transpiration. I'm not really sure why I need water. I know I get thirsty and I drink it, and my doctor says you should drink more water, less coffee, and I ignore him because that's what I do. And coffee is made with water, Mr. Doctor. But I know that it makes everything work better inside. I feel better. On a hot day, you don't drink water, you get headaches. Your skin gets tighter. You're more susceptible to sunburn, etc., etc. But I don't have to explain to you why I need water, because today we're talking about plants. So the main reasons plants need water, first and foremost, is photosynthesis. Life on this planet is, as we know it, essentially because of photosynthesis. A few other elements, but without that, we wouldn't have plants, which severely curtails oxygen and severely curtails food. So without oxygen and food, most creatures are not living. So photosynthesis is essential. Absorption of nutrients. Plants cannot uptake dry nutrients. The nutrients have to be dissolved in water in order for the roots to take them up. It also carries the sugars created by photosynthesis, which requires water, to the other parts of the plant that need those sugars for growth and development. And then last but not least is to strengthen the cell walls through a process known as turgidity, if you want, which is essentially swollen with water so it's at its max strength. Plant cells have walls around them. As those walls dehydrate, and we'll touch on this a little bit later too, but as those walls dehydrate and the cell itself loses moisture, and the chloroplast is still undergoing photosynthesis because it's getting bombarded with sun and heat, it creates negative suction, loses water, and the cell shrinks down. It's one of the reasons we get wilt. So anyway, let's go on to photosynthesis. So photosynthesis, very simply, is plant food. I know a lot of people, if you ask them what is plant food, the first answer that comes is fertilizer. And it's not. Fertilizer is more the multivitamin, the nutrient, if you will. So, when I was younger, much younger, my diet wasn't great. Lots of pizza, lots of burgers and fries, lots of coffee still, lots of beer, not so much in the way of healthy vegetables and fruits. And that was fine at the time. I was young and healthy, and I probably survive off Tupperware and go work for the day. Now, not so much. But I was getting food and carbs and sugars, might not have been the healthiest to burn for energy, but I wasn't getting any kind of, proper amounts of calcium and zinc and vitamin C and all of that good stuff. That's what the fertilizer is. The fertilizer is the multivitamin to boost the things that plant might not be getting. But plant food is light. The light hits the leaf inside the cell, and we're not going into botany here. This is staying on watering. So this is all broad strokes. But inside the cell, there's a chloroplast. inside the chloroplast is where a chemical reaction occurs. The plant intakes light, normally sunlight when we're talking about our garden plants, our house plants. We can do artificial indoor lights, but we'll talk about outdoor plants. That is primarily the discussion here. See, water too.
Very topical.
And the plant takes in the light. It also needs carbon dioxide, which is readily available in the air, and it needs water. So it pulls the water up from the roots, carbon dioxide, it pulls in through its leaf through a process known as transpiration, through the stomata, which are basically how the plant breathes. And then the light is bombarding all the cells on the surface, and it's pulling that in. And that undergoes a chemical reaction in the chloroplast. In turn, it gives off oxygen through the stomata. So same as us breathing in and out, the stomata is doing the same, just reverse. We breathe out CO2, breathe in oxygen. The plant breathes in CO2 and breathes out oxygen. Side note, that's one of the reasons why they believe when they say you talk to a plant, you actually help it. Now, I don't know if that's true. I've never looked into it, but it's kind of cool because you're up close and as you're talking, you're expelling CO2 and the plant is absorbing it. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. I've never actually looked it up, but it just sounds cool. And it's a pretty harmless fact, even if it isn't true. Bam!
Oh, sorry.
Everybody's a critic. Wow, Brandy.
I'm so sorry.
Just talking about a story. But essentially, what it does, I'll get back on track instead of telling my little stories, is it takes all of that light, water, and carbon dioxide, turns it into sugars, amino acids, oxygen, and gets that through the plant. So it gets it to the roots, the flowers, the fruits, everything that needs it. So, and it works by two systems, the phloem and the xylem. So the phloem, and if you look on the slide, the phloem is the vascular system, and that's responsible for transporting the product of photosynthesis around the plant. So the stomata, if you think about the stomata as our lungs, breathes in and out, CO2 in, oxygen out. For us, it's different. Think of the phloem as our veins, okay? And the phloem are taking all of that, oxygenated, but in this case, it's the results of photosynthesis around the plant. And then the xylem goes the other way. And the xylem brings the water up from the roots, brings up the nutrients, or fertilizers, the natural occurring nutrients in the soil. And that brings that up through the roots, up through the stem, and pushes it out to where it's needed, which is the leaves. The leaves then get that and push the other stuff back. So it's a constant system, very similar to us. I think a lot of people have trouble understanding plants. Why do we fertilize? What is fertilizer? How does it work? How do they breathe? Because it seems alien, but it's very similar to us. They're different organs, but the process is much the same. Our veins and arteries are constantly cycling oxygenated blood. Our lungs are, dispelling the CO2, the exhausted oxygen, and bringing oxygen back in. Same thing with the phloem and the xylem and the photosynthesis. Their photosynthesis, creating sugars. That's our food. So it's all happening on a cellular level on the broad stroke of the plant. And without the water, the photosynthesis still tries to take place. So if you look at the next slide about underwatering. So one thing I'm going to touch on, since we touched on the last slide, is if you think about the photosynthesis. So as long as there is sunlight hitting the plant, it's trying to photosynthesize. That's exactly what the cell is doing. It's not intelligent. It is just doing literally its purpose. But if there's no water coming in, it can't undergo the proper chemical reaction. So what ends up happening is, think of it like a pump. If you run a pump in a fountain, a sump pump, whatever, and you do not have the water running through that pump and you dry run it, eventually it's going to burn out. It needs that water running through to do its job. It's the same thing. So it's photosynthesizing, but it doesn't have water. Eventually it starts running out. It's causing a negative suction. So it's depleting, it's not regenerating. So essentially, it's pulled all the water out. It can't create sugars, but this chemical reaction that needs the moisture is happening. So when you see a plant in wilt, normally it's underwatering. Now it can be overwatering, can also be disease and pest, but we're specifically talking about underwatering here. So we're going to continue with that. And the dehydration, like I just said, is that lack of water coming in, and it causes a loss of turgidity. So that cell, when it's nice and hydrated and it has all the water it needs, and the xylem is doing its job and it's pulling up the correct amount of water and it's getting it up into the leaf, and that cell is nice and fat, sassy and juicy, it's undergoing the thing. But as that water depletes, it loses its strength. Think about if we get dehydrated. Often we can feel skinny, our skin feels tight, we're itchy, because everything is pulling in. Same kind of idea. And plus, the transpiration is happening. So now the plant is really hot. If you ever touched a pump that's dry running, it's getting hot. Plus, on these hot days we're about to get, that heat is happening. So much like us, we run in the heat, we stop like out of breath, we need to breathe. The plant's doing the same thing, but again, it has no moisture. You're dehydrated, you go for a run, play soccer, go for a bike ride, we hear of it all the time. There's a good chance you're passing out. Maybe that's why I gotta drink more water so I don't pass out.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's the same with a plant. It's exhausted, it has pushed itself. Transpiration is happening, chemical reactions are happening, and it cannot keep up. The negative pressure, like I said, it's undergoing all of this, and that pressure is causing it to fold in on itself. Watering is obviously the immediate solution. Oftentimes you see a plant in wilt, you hit it with water, an hour later, it's right back up because the system is working again. Like a pump. You walk by a fountain with a dry pump and it's going, it's making horrible noises. You add the water and next thing you know, you hear, and then the water cascades. Same thing. You add the water, everything starts working properly. And a good soil will help. That's why I brought these up. If you've got a really, really heavy soil, a heavy clay, a really heavy compost, compost isn't that bad, a really heavy topsoil, again, not that bad, but what can end up happening is the soil, it can be one of two things. Either the water hits it and it just drains straight through, it's not staying on your roots, or it hits it, it pulls on the top because it can't make it through, and then it just feeds away or it evaporates. Having good things that help aerate your soil and hold moisture are amazing, and that's your perlites, your vermiculites, your peat mosses. Compost and topsoil to an extent, but a lot of those can be heavy, and they can actually add to overwatering. And overwatering affects plants, and you can actually see in that picture, the reason I included it, the same picture twice, is because if you're overwatering, you can actually have the same effect. A lot of times, I've spoken to people and they're like, oh, my plant is wilting. I'm watering it 5 times a day and it's not perking up. Stop watering. What you've done is you've drowned the root system. So we're exhausted. It's really hot outside. We're dehydrated. We can't catch a breath. Okay? You take that person and you're like, oh my God, they're dehydrated. You throw them in water and hold them down. You're not helping. Now they still can't breathe. They still can't hydrate. And now they're drowning. Same thing with a plant. So your plant, you might have given it all the water at once, but you're drowning those roots. And what happens is now the roots can't take up the oxygen. The soil is too tight around them. It's too heavy. There's too much saturation and they can't get enough water up. So the xylem system starts shutting down. However, photosynthesis is still happening. So, you know, as it's going on, the plant is still wilting. You need to find that balance between letting the soil dry out and giving it enough water. And keeping your soil constantly wet is not a good thing. You can start causing root decay. You can start causing root rot. And basically what will happen is the roots shut down. So now they're not breathing. Now they're not active. Now they can't do anything with, if they're getting any sugars from the plant at all, because you're not giving it water. They can't actively grow to get themselves out of the mess. They start dying, which is then going to make the whole situation even worse. Same fix. Good soil and water accordingly. So the other day, after we had all that rain, got really nice out that evening. I was sitting outside. I walked around, I checked on all my beds, and they were drying out nicely. I checked on my pots drying out nicely. I didn't water that night at all. Next morning I watered, but I let everything dry out. I let the soil lift out. I let everything, nothing wilted, nothing was in any trouble. And I was gauging it on what my plants were doing. So it's finding that balance. Overwatering and underwatering are both very detrimental. And you know, the bizarre thing is they have kind of the same symptoms at first. Obviously, as it develops, the symptoms do change. Much like us. Again, you're running, you're dehydrated, you can't breathe properly, you pass out. You take somebody, you throw them underwater, they're still not breathing, they pass out. Now, the causes of death are going to be very, very, very different at the end, but the immediate effect is the same. They're not getting oxygen and water in the levels they need and the way they require them. Same thing with the plant. So that's kind of the science behind the watering. And the other thing is that the difference in water, and I don't want to scare anybody away here whatsoever. I water, I don't have a rain barrel. One of the things I've never set up, I should do it. I have no other reason other than I'm delinquent on it, but I should set up a rain barrel. But I don't, I use tap water. My hose is on my outside faucet. My house plants get it from the kitchen sink. So I don't want anybody to look at this slide and look at what I'm saying and go, oh my God, I'm doing more harm to my plants with tap water. You're not, but there is very distinct differences in tap water. So I'm going to swap gears for a quick second here, and I'm going to talk about house plants. We got a lot of people who get house plants, and they come up and they go, hey, my leaves, especially, probably can't see that, is there a small one I can pick up? There absolutely isn't a smaller one, so I'm going to knock stuff over. I'll just slide stuff down. But what people will see, and you won't see it on this one, but right there around the very tip of the leaf, around the edge of it, it starts to go brown. And they go, oh my God, I'm killing my plant. You're not. It's just the water, especially the Calgary water, with our heavy minerals and the salts in it. Basically, the plant starts taking them up and it causes a little bit of leaf burn. Nearly every one of my house plants has that on the leaves. They are all thriving. They're all doing great. I'm not even worried about it. I have too many plants. It's not in my time or in my budget to start buying distilled water and watering with that. They get what they get from the tap. And the other thing is our tap water, it tends to be so heavily filtered, good for us, that any kind of nutritional value is completely taken from it. So the water is as neutral as can possibly be. So the plant isn't getting any benefit from that. And then a while ago, we discussed pH levels. And we talked about how the vast majority of plants like it more acidic. Well, a lot of our tap water is actually alkaline. And the acidity allows plants to uptake the nutrients more readily that are in the soil, or MPK. Let's just talk macronutrients that are in there. And an actual acidity helps them uptake that. Our tap water is more alkaline, So it can throw off the pH. Again, I've watered every single one of my veggies this year with whatever rainwater they've got. That's maybe 10% of the watering. The other 90% is coming straight out of my hose, straight out of my faucet. They're thriving. I've already got baby tomatoes. I've already got baby peppers. My seedlings are growing massively. Broccoli this big already. So it's not going to be a bad thing. I don't want somebody to look at this and go, oh, no more tap water. Absolutely not. I just want, scientifically to understand the difference. If you can gather rainwater and use rainwater, go for it. I know people who live in condos, townhouses, apartments even, and they gather rainwater to use for their indoor plants, much to the plant's benefit. So the same thing. And then if we look at the rainwater, it's literally the exact opposite. So there tends to not be any hard minerals or salts. It tends to be just a very, very clean water. It tends to be more acidic. So if you look there, we get that 5.6 to 6. It contains nitrates. And I don't know if any of you have noticed, I've said it for a while. The water, and in Calgary, the terrifying thing about our lightning and thunderstorms is they often bring hail. I'm not even going to discuss that. If you're from Calgary, you know what it does. But when it's a lightning storm without hail and that water, that I've always said my plants seem to do way better after a lightning storm than regular rain. There's actually science behind it. So when the lightning explodes, bah! I love doing my impressions. It actually supercharges literally the air and the water, and it actually boosts the nitrates and the ammonium, and it soaks that into the plants, which is massively beneficial. So all of those things are great, but again, don't be scared off on your tap water. Don't think you're doing damage. At the end of the day, the plant needs water. That's the most essential part. Then I see a lot of people out watering their gardens, and they'll be standing with their hose, watering directly on the leaf. At the end of the day, it's fine. In fact, there are some benefits that I've listed here. But really, if you have to choose between leaves and roots, get your water on the roots. And the reason for that is the roots need it to uptake the nutrients. We already spoke about that. So you have a fertilizer, and the fertilizer breaks down, and they're solids. There's the NPK. Maybe you're doing an iron. Maybe you're doing some of the micronutrients. Whatever. It doesn't matter. They're large particles, and they're dry, and the plant can't uptake that. It's basically just sitting on the root, and there's nothing happening. It's like me trying to drink this water through osmosis. Okay, not going to happen. I got to crack it. I got to drink it. That's how I need to uptake it. So when we water, and especially if you're using a water-soluble fertilizer, but regardless if you're using a granular, a shake and feed, a steak, whatever, that water dissolves that. And then when the plant uptakes the water, it also uptakes the nutrients. And that's how that works. It's, as we touched on, necessary for the xylem system. So if your plant, water the leaves all you want, but if that water isn't getting down to the roots, it's not working. Those roots need to uptake that water for that vascular system to work. And it also cools the soil. So a lot of times when I'm discussing water in here, say I'm talking about a tomato. A tomato, the roots don't really get super deep. It only has 1 year to live. So it'll have a massive roots, and they'll get pretty deep, but it's not like a tree or some of the perennials. They're not these big, hardy, thick roots. And a lot of them are very close to the surface because we're watering so often, they don't have to go deep. That soil is getting incredibly hot. They're having an adverse reaction. So cooling the soil as you're watering can actually help. But with that being said, it's not a bad thing to hit the leaves, especially early in the morning. So this morning I watered, and I'm watering the roots, And then when I'm done, I've got my hose nozzle on shower and I spray off all the plants. It helps clean off any dust, it clean off fungal spores, wash away any bugs. The bugs are like, oh, I don't like this. It also leaves some moisture on because first thing in the morning, all my pollinators are out, gives them a drink to start their day. And when it's really, really hot, as much as I don't like watering my foliage when it's really hot, again, it can cool down. And when that plant is cooking hot, the sun is hitting it, and that transpiration is happening, and photosynthesis is happening at a lightning pace, it can actually help cool it down. Again, much like us drinking water or hitting a shower or standing in a mister, cooling down the surface helps cool us down. Because I looked at the weather forecast, and not only is it going to be hot, and some days they're calling for 37 degrees, like it is going to be hot. They're also saying little to no cloud cover. In the next week, I think we're getting something like, in the next, like, I think it was 6 days, we're getting something like 102 hours of sunlight.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. That's like 16 hours a day, basically, 15 hours a day. I did the math, and of course I forgot to make a note of it. But it's somewhere in the region, call it 100 hours.
Yeah.
That's a heck of a lot of sun. Great, wonderful for the plants, as long as they can metabolize it. As long as we're giving them the water and the nutrients they need to be able to withstand that, your plants are going to thrive. Let's just hope when it's done, we get a day or two of like a nice, elongated, cooling rain. In Calgary, I wouldn't count on it. So that is kind of the science on why we water. And what I'm not going to touch on during this webinar is the correct time to water. I'm not going to touch on that. I'm not going to say you have to water your tomatoes X amount of times, and you have to water it X time of the day, because not everybody can do it. And hashtag no water shaming. That's the new hashtag. As long as your plant is getting water, you know, I frequently tell this this anecdote, and a lot of people come up to me and they'll say, when is the best time to water? And I will reply 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. And that is immediately followed up with, when is the second best time to water? And normally what I say is, tell me when you water and I'll tell you how to do it. Because you water first thing in the morning, wash down all the leaves, soak everything, make sure the soil is saturated, no worries. You're watering at 8 o'clock at night, you might not want to have standing pools of water. You're introducing you know, slugs. It's a great breeding ground, mosquitoes, things like that. So there are different tricks depending on the day, but that's not the purpose of this webinar. It's the science and how you water, because honestly, you might not have time in the morning for whatever reason. Life comes at us fast. Maybe you slept in. You could wake up with best intentions, your kid's sick, car won't start, you break a shoelace, whatever. Doesn't matter. You might not be able to get out into your garden right there and then. So the plant needs water. We've established that. As long as your plant is getting it, that's all we really care about for the purpose of this. So then we talk about the different ways to water. And I'm not talking about rain. We all know what rain does. Mother Nature does her thing. We love her for it. But that's why a lot of times you look at Nose Hill. For example, for anybody not in Calgary, Nose Hill is a huge park right here in the city. In the spring, it's magnificent. It's green, long grass, wildflowers. Normally by July, it's brown because we haven't had enough rain. So we know the purpose of rain. We know what it does. I'm not discussing that. Rain does its own thing. You're not going to stop it from raining on your garden. I mean, technically you could if you wanted to for some bizarre reason. But we have no say in that. That is going to happen regardless of what we do. So I'm talking about ways we choose to water. And that's primarily through using a wand or a nozzle. A wand is just the, big sibling of a nozzle. Off they go. We're talking about using a sprinkler, all different types. What else do I have here? Soaker hose, very important. Irrigation system, don't have one. They are very specialized. We will talk about that. Watering cans, all different sizes and colors. I even got a spray bottle to talk about misting leaves, but deep watering, okay? So those are all, maybe not all, but those are the primary ways of watering. So let's look into them. And nozzles and wands are by far the most common. And I'm not saying that because it's what I use. I'm saying that because other than doing webinars and media and stuff like that, I'm also a purchaser. So I know how many of these I buy compared to how many of these compared to how many of these. And these are the number one. And the reason for that is they are incredibly versatile. They're lightweight. You don't have to lug them around the garden. You can attach them on your hose, never touch them again. Most hoses, my garden hose, 90% of the time has one of these attached to it. I don't use sprinklers personally because I don't water my grass. If it doesn't have one of these, it's because I've taken it off, so I can literally drown something or fill up my watering can or something like that. But this is pretty much a permanent fixture on my hose. Easy shut off, on, off, on, off. So you're watering and you're like, oh, too much. You stop and it stops immediately. All the different ways you can do it. You're at the end of your hose, you got to water something over there, you put it on jet. Whoop, now I'm watering 30 feet away. I want to water something there, I put it on shower. I got something gentle, my seedlings, I put it on mist. So that's what that does. These, great as well. Thing I like about these, you have this. Your plant is this big, but you need to water the soil. You got to bend down. You got this. You can water all of your roots. You have a hanging basket, you can water your hanging basket. So it really helps with reach, gets you to the back of a flower bed. Ones are probably my personal favorite, but they're essentially the same thing. There's not much in them. And they're efficient. You can literally water this plant, stop. Water this plant, stop. You want to wash the leaves off, get rid of any aphids, dust, pollen, whatever's built up on it. You can soak down the leaves really easy. So these are probably the best way of doing it. And I think everybody is familiar with them. Plus, they're also really good when your kid's being annoying from 20 feet away. Turn it on jet, shoot them. Wonderful. So I'm specifically talking about Harry. And then another one, and we've all seen these. Everybody knows what they are, the sprinkler. There's ones like this, the impact sprinkler, and that's one that goes. There's the oscillating sprinkler that's. And then the spot sprinkler that just goes. Like that. I know. I've practiced my sprinkler poses. Those are new yoga poses too, by the way. Just so you guys know. Great thing again about sprinklers, lightweight, extremely mobile. You can put it on the grass, pull it up, move your hose, put it somewhere else on the grass. They're fun to play in. They really are.
I love it.
Yeah, exactly. See, you're never too old to run through a sprinkler. I've done it before where I'm walking, it's a hot day, and somebody's watering their garden, and it's coming out onto the sidewalk, and you just go stand in it. They have a broad range. This has got a huge reach. So you don't have to, watering your grass with this versus this, huge difference. They can reach much further, and they're amazing for the birds, right? The birds will time it. They'll come down, they'll have a bath, and then when this starts doing its hard pulse, we'll fly into the tree, we'll wait, we'll come back down. Robins love the oscillating sprinklers, so they're really good for that. However, they are rather inefficient. You put something like this, you can see the spike on it, and you sink it in your garden. Well, the moment you have a plant this tall next to it, it's not getting past that plant. So watering a perennial bed or a vegetable bed won't always be great with one like that. Plus, a lot of time it's shooting water through the air. The water lands on the foliage. Well, on a really hot day, that's evaporating really quick before it can get down into the soil. So they're not very efficient and wasteful. Like I just said, I have no problem on a hot day. I'll go stand at the edge of somebody's property and let that water hit me. But it might be a quarter, it might be a third of your water is just washing down the drain. But wasting a natural resource, very valuable natural resource, and your money. So always try and work with your settings. You can see a lot of them have settings, so you can set the range of where you want it to move to. Keep an eye on things like that. And be aware sprinklers are best to use not in the middle of the heat to maximize that efficiency. But at the end of the day, they're fun and they're a good bit of water. So that's our sprinklers. Next is the soaker hose. I love the soaker hose. I really do. Probably the most efficient way to water. You can take this. This one is only 25 feet. Put 3 of them together, you got 75 feet. I am good at math.
So good.
Ask me 5.
What do you mean?
Ask me how many 5 is.
How many
125, Brandy. Already had the answer.
Stick with us. You'll learn something.
Yeah. Watering, gardening, and math. You're welcome. But you can run the, I totally lost my train. I don't look at my notes. That's why we have notes during our webinars and not during GA Kids TV. But the great thing is it attaches to any hose, exactly the same as that attaches. And you can run it through the base of your plants. Another thing I love about these, if you take some tape and tape up the areas, so you have a plant, you have a plant. You've got your soaker hose, you tape up this area here, you're not going to water this soil. This soil doesn't need to be watered. All you're doing there is wasting your money and giving weeds a good chance to grow. So this is only going to water the roots. That's great for all the things we touched on. No waste. You're not going to be hitting any sidewalks. You're not going to be hitting anything like that. Again, ridiculously lightweight. Easy shut off. Turn off the faucet. It's going to stop working. But they're not very versatile. They really only have one purpose. You can't use a soaker hose to do your lawn. You can't use a soaker hose to wash your leaves off. I don't want to say it's permanent, but it's semi-permanent. You run one of these through all of your plants. Well, your plants come up and they start growing and they get there, and then you want to move this. It can be a challenge, especially doing it without hurting the plants. So if you're doing it, just kind of keep an eye that, oh yeah, this might have to live there. But they work wonderful. Ground covered junipers. They work amazing with that. Run down the rows of vegetable gardens. They work amazing there. They're an incredible way to water. Probably the most efficient. But again, they do have drawbacks. And that's the thing, all of these have drawbacks. Every single one of them has the pros and cons. So again, when I'm telling you this, much like I was just telling you about the tap water, this isn't to say if you're using a sprinkler or a nozzle or a soaker hose, I'm not saying this is bad, use this is bad, use it. No, I'm just telling you the way you're doing it, what you can expect, and if there's a more efficient way, maybe you're like, oh, I've been watering my grass with this for the last 5 years. It'll work. Put it on a soaker and just flood your grass. Put it on, I wouldn't put it on jet for my grass. Put it on shower and just gently do all of that. It'll work, but you'll be out there for an hour. Slam on a sprinkler and walk away, you're done. You can even throw the kids outside while you sit on the hammock, have a cold beer or a cold coffee. So that's soaker hoses. The next, I don't have any parts of this, is in-ground irrigation. I think we've all seen them. The city of Calgary uses it. You'll be sitting somewhere and you hear a noise and then something pops up from the grass and you hear all the water running. And that's in-ground irrigation. incredibly effective. You can set the heads anywhere. You can place it structurally wherever you want. You can set a timer. So you want to water at 4:30 in the morning, but you're not one of those people that likes waking up at 4:30. This is going to do the job for you. No problem. You can put up a rain sensor. So you can say, if we get a 1/4 of an inch of rain, I don't want this to turn on. When the rain sensor dries out, this turns back on. So it can actually monitor how much water your garden already has to decide if it's going to turn on. It's almost got a built-in override, if you will. However, they are expensive. And I am not slamming the irrigation companies here. I'm just saying the price of one of these to the price of an in-ground irrigation system, there is a difference. It's an investment. You have to decide whether or not it's worth that investment. I can't tell you that. They're inefficient, much like the sprinkler. They are going to pop up and just start blasting water. If the head isn't set properly, it'll be hitting the sidewalk every time, thus being wasteful. A lot of times, if you have a path, so I have a garden path, I have an entranceway, etc. Don't water that. There's no need to water that. But your irrigation system has to hit it. It doesn't have a choice. Same as a sprinkler. And literally, all you're doing is evaporating your money. That's a valuable resource in your money. They're wasteful and inefficient for that, and they're extremely static. You design your garden. You're like, oh my god, I love this. This is how I want it. You run everything. You set it up. 3 years later, you want to put a tree somewhere, and I have seen this happen. You plant the tree, irrigation head comes up, and it blasts into the tree. Well, now the rest of that garden isn't getting watered. It comes up, water, 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 bang, 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 water, water. Anything back here is now bone dry, and that tree is taking a hammering. I've seen people dig a tree and dig straight through an irrigation head or an irrigation pipe. So they are extremely static. You're not moving them. Like I said, a soaker hose can be tricky to move, but it is movable. You are not moving this. But with that being said, hey, my garden is done. I don't want to plant any more trees. I don't want to do anything. Everything is set up. You really don't have to think about watering again. You set your system and away you go. So, and a lot of them too will come, they're hardwired and hard plumbed. So it draws automatically. You don't have to worry about it. And they have a battery backup. So if you lose power, it runs on battery. When the power comes up, it stops running on battery. So you literally set the timer once and you're done. So there is a purpose for them. And then that finally brings us to watering cans. And watering cans are probably the most efficient. Again, ridiculously lightweight. Yeah, you put water in it, it gets a bit heavier. But in and of itself, even a big one like this, there's nothing to them. They're just a durable plastic. And they are incredibly efficient. Water, enough water. That's literally it. You only water the soil unless you've got one of these, in which case you may be hitting the leaves. But again, that's not always a bad thing. Time consuming though. Okay. Water my entire garden with this? No thanks. No thanks. That might do one tomato plant, and tomato plants alone, I've got 12.
I never want to water again.
You'd get halfway through and you'd be like, there's got to be a better way. You'd be filling up buckets and just throwing that. Like, so it is time consuming, but it's affordable and it's effective, and especially for the house plants. So the lowly, humble watering can definitely has a place. We do all of the pots on our deck with a watering can.
Oh yeah.
Just, I don't want to pull the hose up on the deck. Then when I'm using the hose, I can give it too much. This, I can completely control the flow. So I do all of my, I've got some veggies and flowers on the deck. They are all done with watering cans. Everything else in my garden, though, is done with my nozzles, which I touched on. And yes, I said nozzles. And then we have the deep water system. And that's what this is. And the deep water system, it's effective, it's efficient, there's no waste because all the water is coming out underground. So you drive this down so that, wow, my papers are just blowing everywhere. There we go. However, it's very selective. I wouldn't water my tomato with this. Stick it in the ground, attach the hose, turn it on, stand there for 5 minutes, lift it up, go to bed. Very, very, very inefficient time-wise for doing that. And if my roots are only this deep, well, it's not really going to help with that, is it? So it is very selective. They can become static. And what I mean by that is these are ideal for trees or thoroughly established large perennial beds, because essentially they'll flood all of the deep soil. But especially and primarily, these are trees and shrubs. And I'll see people go, they take it and they shoom, drive it into the ground. And then they're like, great, this tree needs water. They leave it in there, they do it, it waters. Well, the ground gets hard around it. Tree roots start growing around it. They go to remove it and it doesn't want to come out. And I've seen that happen. Not often, but enough times that I thought I would mention it. And if you look in the picture, you can see the roots actually on it. Because if you put this in the ground and it's a source of water, the roots are actively going to find that water. This is the water source. They get to it, they're like, you're not going anywhere. Love you. Love you. So that's what the roots are going to do. So they can become static. Best thing you can do, push it in, water after an hour, 2 hours, a day, whatever, pull it out. Go do another tree. Next time you go to that tree, put it in a different spot. Don't leave it and think, oh, it'll be great. Move it around frequently. That should prevent it from becoming static. So that's pretty much it for watering. I do want to do a quick recap. Do I have time? Oh, I'm going to make time. I had no idea what it is. See, that's why I don't have time to talk about all the other specifics. But the summer is here. This is our last webinar. Thanks, everybody, for being here, enjoying them. Thanks to Brandy for working with me, doing the blog posts. I've learned a lot doing these. I hope you guys have learned a lot watching. But we're into the time now where all of the hard work should be done in the garden. And I'm not talking if you're building a patio, a deck, if you're re-landscaping. I'm talking about your planting should be done. Your pruning, your raking, all of those jobs should be over and done with. So moving forward, keep an eye out for your fertilizers. Stay on top of that. Like I said at the beginning, that's like the multivitamins. The plants are going to be getting enough light, everything else. But in order to properly process that and be healthy, they're going to need more. It's like having a kid. It's very important the kid has a diverse, healthy diet. You know what? Once you get to be fully developed and fully grown, and I'll speak personally here, as a young man, everything was developed. It didn't really matter what I ate. I could do whatever job. 2 hours sleep, ate nothing the day before except a large pizza. I'd go out and landscape for 12 hours, no problem. If I did that today, I'd cry. Basically, this webinar would be an hour of me crying. That would be the watering. So your young plants and your established plants, because I take supplements now. I'm no longer that, young, healthy 20, 25-year-old. I'm now like, I'm on the wrong side of 45, I'll tell you that. So I take my supplements now. That's what the fertilizer is, keeping it healthy. Weeding. If you've been weeding regularly, you should have slowed them down. They're always going to pop up. They're opportunistic. They're hardy. They know what they're doing. So get on top of that weeding. Don't slow down now. Deadheading. We want those flowers to stay healthy. Perennials. We want the energy to go back into the roots. Annuals. We want them to push out more flowers. Stay on top of that. Pruning. We may get heavy winds. We may get hail. We may get all kinds of things. A kid might swing on the branch of a tree. Whatever the reason, we may need to stay up with pruning. Keep an eye on that. And always keep an eye out for your pests and diseases. The quicker you react, the quicker you can get it under control. We've talked about all of these in other blog posts and other webinars. GA Kids TV, we've got a ton of source material. So keep an eye on that and enjoy the garden. And please, 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 try not to garden when it is. I've been gardening for decades now, both commercially and personally. I am not planning on gardening next week. that is too much. Nobody needs to be out in that heat. Everything I just listed there can wait. Okay, not watering, we will need to do that. But I'm talking about getting out there and weeding an entire bed. Let those weeds grow for a week. They won't hurt in 1 week, I promise. So that wraps it up. I hope that answered some questions about watering. I hope the science helps you understand why we need to water, how much we need to water, the difference between under and over watering, and then all the different methods you can have, because not everybody knows all of this. Not everybody knows that a soaker hose exists. Not everybody knows about deep watering. Not everybody realizes sprinklers, whilst fun and easy, can be inefficient. A lot of times people are looking at how can I, maximize efficiency and budget, right? Maybe a sprinkler isn't for you. Maybe you're like, my time is my most important asset, slamming a sprinkler and leave. So whatever works best for you, gardening, watering, everything else is not one size fits all. It's what works best for you. And we hope to give you the knowledge to make the best, most educated choice.